Bernice Plumtree smoothed her plain green jacket, standing near Oakhaven Academy, situated in quiet Littleton. She had a subtle way of looking, average height, sandy hair in a simple braid, round spectacles, and a thin form that made her look delicate. Her simple clothes showed her calm personality. What her work friends did not know was that under her easygoing outside was 10 years of Aikido training. Bernice had earned her third-degree black belt and mastered pressure point tactics at Littleton's top dojo. She could snap thick sticks, but kept her two worlds apart. English was her true love. Oakhaven Academy's grey stone buildings had 42 classrooms. Bernice's room, 112A, was near the main office on the first floor, away from the more crowded areas. Her first week at Oakhaven started with quiet hope. Students walked into her fourth-period British literature class, carrying their heavy bags full of books they almost never opened. "Good day, everyone," Bernice said calmly. "Please get out your copies of Pride and Prejudice. We'll look at Chapter 2 today." A giggle started in the back, where Trevor Hamilton had made his special spot. Very tall and big from the school's hockey team, Trevor got attention because he was big and thought highly of himself, because his mom was on the school board. His dark hair was perfect, and expensive clothes made him different from others. Next to him sat Garrett Ford, a skinny cross-country runner with sly eyes, and Ethan Price, whose dad ran the biggest law firm in town. "Hey, Miss Plumtree," Trevor called out, saying her name like Prune Tree. "Why do we need to read this old junk? Nobody cares about some old book." Some students moved in their seats, knowing what his tone meant. Bernice had seen things like this during her training, but Trevor's smile said this was just the start. "Literature helps us see things in new ways and learn about different times," she answered calmly, turning to write the day's goals on the chalkboard. "Jane Austen's book talks about things that still matter today." "Yeah, sure," Garrett said, getting nods from his friends. "My mum says teachers just pick boring stuff to bug us. She says you learn more in the real world." Bernice kept writing, not taking the bait. She had learned in Aikido that the best way to fight was to avoid it. Staying calm and patient was better than fighting right away. This kept happening for days. Trevor would come in late, making noise with the door. He stopped lessons with loud sighs and mean comments, and Garrett and Ethan made things worse. "Miss Plumtree," Ethan said during reading, "I think something is wrong with my seat." He hit his book hard on the wood, making a loud noise that stopped everyone from focusing. "Please stop that," Bernice asked quietly. "Others are trying to read." "Oh, sorry, Teach," Ethan replied, acting innocent. "Didn't know you were so jumpy. Maybe get some cotton?" Other students watched all this with interest. Some looked sorry, like Maya Lee, a smart girl who sat in front and often stayed after class to talk about books. Others looked amused, and some looked uneasy but did not say anything. Mr. Andrew Cole, the music teacher down the hall, had noticed Bernice during meetings. His friendly eyes and kind smile made her feel good. They had talked over tea twice about lesson plans and their love for folk songs. Bernice liked these talks and how Andrew listened without judging. The bullying got worse in the second week. Trevor moved desks, making it hard for Bernice to walk to the board. He would accidentally drop pens when she talked, making loud noises that made her jump. Once, he put a mean drawing on the board, showing a stick person labeled teacher being chased by bigger people labeled students. The real trouble started during a lesson about what things mean in stories. Bernice was talking about the meaning of a rose when Trevor raised his hand, acting very polite. "I was wondering if you could show us how a rose grows," he said, acting like he was just asking. "For people like me who need to see things." "I think the book tells us enough," Bernice answered, knowing it was a trap. "Come on, teach," Garrett added. "Show us how it blooms." The class started chanting, show us," led by Ethan's loud clapping. Bernice felt hot in her face as everyone looked at her, waiting to see if she would give in. "We will go on to the next part," she said firmly, but she sounded less sure. The students saw she was weak, and Trevor smiled like a cat that had found a mouse. The next day was even worse. Trevor had found her personal phone number and started sending messages during class. Her phone would buzz with messages like, "Your voice is boring," and "When will this end?" Each time she would look at her desk and his group would smirk. At lunch, she talked to the assistant principal, but Mrs. Grant seemed more worried about keeping things quiet than fixing the problem. "Have you tried connecting with these students?" Mrs. Grant asked, not looking up from her papers. "Maybe you could use more current examples." Bernice felt more alone. The idea that she should please her bullies instead of stopping them showed she would get no help from the school. The last straw came on a Thursday afternoon during fifth period. Sunlight came through windows as Bernice tried to lead a talk about doing what is right in stories. She felt how silly it was. "Can anyone give me an example of doing what is right from your own life?" she asked. Trevor's hand shot up. "Yeah, I have one. Sometimes you have to be brave to tell a teacher they are doing a bad job." The class was quiet. Even Maya looked up, worried. "That's not what I meant," Bernice said carefully. "No, listen," Trevor went on, standing up, acting like he was on stage, "like it takes guts to tell someone they are boring, right?" He started walking forward, and Bernice took a step back. Everyone noticed. Her moving back made the class excited as they knew something was about to happen. "For example," Trevor went on, now very close, "someone might be brave enough to say this class is a waste and you are the worst teacher ever." Garrett and Ethan stood up, making a half circle around her desk. Other students stayed sitting but leaned forward to see better, phones out to record what they knew would be big. "Please go back to your seats," Bernice said, her voice sounding worried. "Or someone might be brave," Trevor said, getting closer, "to say your clothes look like they came from a lost and found box." His friends laughed loudly. Bernice felt her face turn red as she knew Andrew Cole might hear the noise. Thinking about him seeing her like this was hard to bear. "That's enough," she said more firmly, but her voice broke. "Is it though?" Trevor asked, his voice getting mean. "Because I think someone with real courage might even test how much someone can take before they break." Before she could move, his hand reached out and grabbed her green jacket. The thin cloth was not strong, and she stumbled back against the board. "Let me go," she said, her voice calm, even though she felt fear. "What if I don't want to?" Trevor replied, holding tighter. "What if I want to see what happens when someone fights back?" The room was silent as his fingers pulled at the cloth. Bernice could hear the sound of ripping as the seams broke. She saw students holding up phones, recording what they thought would be her downfall. But something had changed in Bernice. She was breathing in a slow, steady way that she had practiced many times in the dojo. She stood tall and balanced. Years of training had taught her to answer danger with calm skill, not fear. "I said, let me go," she repeated, and her voice had an edge that made some students look up from their phones. Trevor did not see the change or did not care. He was too busy showing off to see the danger he was in. "Make me," he said, pulling her jacket harder, ripping the cloth at the shoulder. The sound of tearing cloth was too much. Bernice's left hand moved fast, grabbing Trevor's wrist in a hold that stopped the blood flow to his fingers. At the same time, her right hand struck his elbow at the right spot to break his grip. The move was called Akote Gaishi in Aikido, and Bernice did it perfectly. Trevor looked shocked as his hand went numb and his arm was twisted behind him. Before he could move, she stepped to his side and used his own weight to push him face first against the board. "What the hell?" Garrett shouted, moving to help his friend. Bernice turned to him with a look that stopped him. She looked calm and like she knew what he would do before he did it. "I wouldn't," she said simply, and he froze. Trevor tried to get away, but each move made Bernice hold tighter. She had his arm at the right angle to hurt him without really harming him, a way to control him without causing lasting damage. "This is how it works," she said, her voice loud in the quiet room. "You can say sorry for grabbing me and ripping my coat, or I can show you other things I learned in my Aikido training." The news hit the room like a bomb. Students who had been recording now saw something different than they thought. Instead of a weak teacher being made fun of, they saw a trained fighter staying calm. "You're crazy," Trevor gasped, his face against the board. "No," Bernice answered calmly. "I am someone who became a teacher because I care about education and respect. But I am also someone who will not be touched in my classroom." Ethan made the mistake of trying to sneak behind her while she was busy with Trevor. Bernice's eyes, trained by years of practice, saw the move right away. Without letting go of Trevor, she turned and kicked Ethan in the stomach, making him bend over and fall back into a row of desks. The kick was called a meigeri in karate, and Bernice had done it many times against bags and pads. She had held back, using just enough force to wind him. "Anyone else?" she asked, looking around the room with a calm look. The room was silent. Students who had been laughing stared at their teacher in shock. Phones were still recording, but now it was about her skill, not her weakness. "Here is what will happen," Bernice said, holding Trevor tight. "You will say sorry for touching me and ruining my coat. Then you will sit down and be part of this class like the smart young man you can be." "This is assault," Trevor said weakly. "No," Bernice said. "Assault is what you did when you grabbed my coat. This is self-defense, and I have 40 witnesses who can say I used the least force I could to protect myself." She was right, and everyone knew it. The recordings would show she only acted after being grabbed, and that her answer, while surprising, was careful not to hurt him too much. "I will let you go now," she went on, "and you will go back to your seat. If you want to make this worse, I will show you some holds I learned in Aikido. Some of them are very bad." Slowly, she let go of his arm and stepped back, giving him room to move but ready to act if she needed to. Trevor stood up, rubbing his wrist and looking at her with a mix of shock and respect. The door opened as Andrew Cole ran in, hearing the noise. He saw Bernice standing calmly, Trevor rubbing his arm, Ethan catching his breath, and students staring in silence. "Is everything okay in here?" he asked, seeing Bernice's ripped jacket and worried face. "Everything's fine now," she replied, fixing her hair and jacket. "We were just talking about personal space and respect." Andrew knew what had happened. The way Bernice stood, the students' faces and the feel of the room told the story. He looked at her with admiration as he understood what he had missed. "Well," he said, his voice calm, "that sounds like a good lesson. I will let you get back to it." As he left, Bernice heard him chuckle softly in the hall. It made her feel good, even though she was still scared. "Now then," she said, turning to her class, "who can tell me about a character who had to be brave and stand up for themselves?" Maya's hand shot up. "Elizabeth Bennet," she said, her voice full of respect. "She stood up for what was right, even when it was hard." "Good example," Bernice replied, going back to her lesson. What made her courage so special? The class talk was the best she had had since starting at Oakhaven. Students who never spoke before asked good questions. Even Garrett, though still unsure, said something smart about doing what is right. Trevor was quiet for the rest of the period, but he did not cause any trouble. He sat in his seat, touching his wrist and looking at Bernice with curiosity, not anger. When the bell rang, students left quietly, looking back at their teacher. The phone recordings were being shared, but it was not what Trevor had planned. Instead of a weak teacher, they showed a strong woman defending herself. Maya stayed after class, coming to Bernice's desk with concern. "Miss Plumtree, are you okay?" she asked. "That was amazing. I did not know you knew Aikido." "I am fine, thank you," Bernice replied, looking at the rip in her jacket. "I have been training for years. It is a hobby I do not talk about at work. Will you get in trouble for what happened?" Bernice thought about it. I defended myself against an attack. The recordings will show that. Maybe this will make the school see what has been happening in this class. Word spread through Oak Haven faster than gossip. By the end of the day, some teachers said they supported her. Mrs. Grant even said, sometimes students need to learn that actions have results. Monday was different. Trevor came on time and sat down quietly. When Bernice started the lesson, he opened his book and followed along. The change was not big, but the anger was gone. At lunch, he came to her desk while she graded papers. "Miss Plumtree," he said quietly, "I wanted to say sorry for what happened Thursday. I was wrong." She looked at his face and saw he was honest. "Thank you, Trevor. I appreciate that. I thought teachers were just people who could not do anything about bad kids." "Most teachers could do a lot," Bernice replied kindly. "We choose not to because we care about teaching and helping, but that does not mean we are helpless." He understood. "How long have you been doing Aikido?" 10 years. I started in college for confidence. It became more than that." "Why did you not say anything before?" "Because I wanted to be known as a good teacher, not as someone who could fight. What happened Thursday was self-defense, not a show." "You are a good teacher. I was too dumb to see it." The talk changed things. Garrett and Ethan followed Trevor's lead and acted better. The trouble stopped, and learning began. Andrew Cole had watched all this with interest. He respected Bernice even more after seeing how she handled things with strength and wisdom. They talked more often and about personal things. "I have to say," he said over tea, "I was impressed by your skill. That wrist control was perfect." Bernice blushed. "You know martial arts?" "I boxed in college and still train sometimes. I saw how professional you were. You could have really hurt him." "That was never the plan," she said firmly. "I just needed him to know there are limits and results." The change went beyond her class. Other students started treating Bernice with respect because they saw she was good at her job and honest. She had not become a bully. She had just shown she would not be bullied. 3 weeks later, Principal Hamilton, Trevor's mum, pulled her aside. "We have watched the recordings closely. Your answer was right and professional. My son needed that lesson. His grades are better, and he is acting differently. You taught him that actions have results with great skill." Spring brought new chances. Bernice was known as a good teacher and someone not to mess with. Students asked her for advice, seeing her as someone with wisdom and strength. Trevor had become one of her best students. His essay on doing what is right was one of the best she had read. "I wrote about you," he said, when she gave back the paper with a B+. "About me. About how it takes courage to be patient with people who do not deserve it, but also to stand up for yourself when you need to. You could have gotten me kicked out, but you chose to teach me." As the school year ended, Bernice thought about her journey from that first nervous day to being one of Oak Haven's most respected teachers. She had learned that standing up for herself did not mean being someone she was not proud of. Andrew Cole had become important in her life, their relationship growing from work friends to real partners. He liked her strength and her kindness. On the last day of school, Trevor stopped by her room one last time. "Miss Plumtree, you changed how I think. My mom always told me being strong meant pushing people around, but you showed me real strength is knowing when not to push and when to push back." "What will you remember most about this year?" He thought for a moment. "That you could have destroyed me that day, but you chose to help me. I want to be someone who has the power to hurt people, but chooses to help them instead." As summer started, Bernice packed up her room feeling happier than ever before. She had faced her biggest challenge and come out stronger, smarter, and more confident. The ripped jacket still hung in her closet, a reminder of the day she learned that being kind did not mean being weak, and that standing up for yourself was important. She had found the right balance between strength and kindness, control and patience, self-defense and holding back. She had learned that true courage was not about never being afraid. It was about acting with honesty and purpose, even when you were scared. That lesson had changed not just her class, but her whole idea of what it meant to be strong and good in a world that sometimes needed both.